A wicked doctor attacked a young nurse and fired her. But what happened the next morning shocked everyone. It was a calm evening in New York. The kind of evening where the sky glows a soft amber, and the city hums with the quiet rhythm of routine. Inside St. Joseph's private clinic, one of the city's most reputable institutions, Nurse Laura slipped into her scrubs, ready for another long shift. She had done this countless times before, but tonight would be different. Tonight would change everything. Laura had built her name here. Known for her diligence, patience, and unshakable compassion, she was the heartbeat of the evening team. For 5 years, she served this clinic with pride. From comforting nervous patients to training new hires, Laura was the nurse everyone respected and trusted. But there was one patient who had slowly chipped away at her comfort. Mr. Kane. In his early 60s, wheelchair-bound, and without known relatives or visitors, he was often described as lonely but harmless. But Laura knew better. For weeks now, Mr. Kane had been making her feel uncomfortable, watching her too closely, calling her darling or pretty nurse, and always finding some reason to request her help when others were available. She had tolerated it, thinking perhaps she was overreacting, or maybe it was harmless flirtation. After all, that's what people always say, don't they? He's just being friendly. He's an old man. Don't take it so seriously. But Laura knew the difference. There was nothing friendly about the way his eyes lingered or how his hand would brush against hers just a bit too long. Still, she had swallowed her discomfort, for professionalism's sake. For peace. Until tonight. It was just past 7 p.m. The clinic hallways had quieted down, and Laura was reviewing charts at the nurse's station when Mr. Kane wheeled himself over. "Evening, pretty thing," he drawled, lips curling into a grin that made her skin crawl. She inhaled sharply but kept her tone even. "Good evening, Mr. Kane. Do you need something?" "My blanket slipped again," he said. "Mind helping me tuck it back?" She nodded hesitantly and followed him into his room. She had helped countless patients with tasks like this. Routine things, clinical, ordinary. But with Mr. Kane, nothing ever felt routine. As she leaned in to help adjust the fabric, his hand shot out. Quick, intentional, and touched her inappropriately. He smirked. That was the final straw. The fear. The violation. The weeks of silent discomfort. All of it erupted in a single, instinctive motion. She slapped him. Hard. Across the face. The sharp crack echoed in the small room. For a split second, time froze. Mr. Kane stared at her, stunned. Then the smile faded from his lips, replaced by a sneer. Without a word, Laura turned and walked straight to Dr. Brown's office. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. She had to report this. She couldn't keep pretending it wasn't happening. Dr. Martin Brown, the clinic director, sat at his desk, reviewing paperwork. He looked up, mildly irritated by her unannounced entrance. "Dr. Brown, I need to speak with you. It's urgent." He set his pen down. "Go on." She explained, every detail. How Mr. Kane had been inappropriate for weeks, how tonight he crossed the line and touched her again, and how she had reacted in defense. She expected concern, support, at the very least, a promise to investigate. Instead, Dr. Brown's face hardened. "You did what?" he asked coldly. "I slapped him. After he touched me. It wasn't the first time, and before she could finish, he stood up and slapped her. Right across the face. In front of 2 nurses who had just entered the office hallway." Gasps followed. Dr. Brown's voice boomed, louder than the slap. "You put your hands on a patient? Are you out of your mind? Get out." Laura stood frozen, one hand on her burning cheek, eyes wide in disbelief. "He assaulted me," she said, breathless. "I don't want excuses," Dr. Brown barked. "This clinic has a reputation. You just tarnished it. You're finished here." Her mouth went dry. "You're firing me?" "In case I wasn't clear," he snapped. "Leave. Now." The 2 nurses outside didn't dare move. One lowered her gaze. The other covered her mouth, stunned. Laura walked out without another word. Her world collapsed behind her. That night, the city outside was soaked in rain. Her small apartment felt colder than usual, emptier. She sat curled on the edge of her bed, still wearing her scrubs, the slap from both men, one physical, the other emotional, still raw on her skin. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just sat there, staring at the wall where her nursing license was proudly hung, now a mocking symbol of everything she'd lost in one cruel moment. Her phone buzzed with messages. A few coworkers asking if the rumor was true. Some offering vague sympathy. but not one message from Dr. Brown. Not even a call to ask if she was okay. Laura had always thought Dr. Brown was stern. Yes, but just... He ran the clinic with iron discipline but often spoke about ethics and healing with conviction. She admired him once, thought of him as a mentor. But today, when it counted most, he silenced her. He chose reputation over truth, image over safety. And Mr. Kane? He was likely sitting comfortably in his room, spinning a false story about how the angry nurse hit him for no reason. That thought hurt more than the slap. Laura turned off her phone. The rain outside grew louder, matching the storm inside her. She lay down, unsure if she could ever walk back into a clinic again, unsure if she'd ever trust anyone in authority again. But as the storm raged, something quietly lit inside her. She had spoken up. She had defended herself. And while the world punished her for it now, truth had a way of resurfacing. She didn't know it yet, but across the clinic, a small red light blinked on a hidden camera. And soon, very soon, that light would shine on the truth everyone tried to bury. Rain lashed violently against the window panes, as if the heavens themselves were protesting what had taken place just hours earlier. Outside, the streets of New York glistened under the weight of the storm, cold, sharp, relentless. In a city so alive with people, laughter, and noise, it was astonishing how silent a small apartment could feel when everything inside had broken. Laura sat curled on her couch, knees pulled to her chest, a blanket draped over her shoulders, but doing nothing to warm the icy ache that had burrowed into her bones. Her scrubs were still on, damp with rain, crumpled from the collapse of a day that had started with purpose and ended in disgrace. Above her, tilted at an awkward angle, hung her nursing certificate. The elegant lettering now felt like a cruel joke, a symbol of a life she'd built with care, now dismissed with a single slap. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Again, she ignored it. It had been buzzing on and off for the past hour. Colleagues, friends, people who had heard the news and were now offering fragments of sympathy. But none from Dr. Brown. Not a single word. Not a single message. Not even a call to ask if she had made it home. Of course not. She reached over slowly, unlocked the screen, and read a few of the messages. Jenna, I just heard. I can't believe he did that to you. Are you okay? Luis, lab tech, you didn't deserve that. Laura, if you need anything, I'm here. Rebecca, front desk, some of us know what really happened. Please don't shut us out. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but no reply came. What could she say that didn't already sound exhausted? What could she possibly explain to people who had watched her get humiliated, who had turned away out of fear or confusion or silence? She set the phone back down and stared at the certificate again. It had taken her 6 years to become a nurse. Nights of studying anatomy, of barely sleeping during clinicals, of holding patients' hands as they slipped away, of being a rock for families drowning in grief. She had worked so hard to earn that frame on the wall. Now she was just a fired nurse, with a story too painful to say aloud. Laura rose and walked toward the kitchen. The light above flickered, buzzing like it, too, had grown tired of the day. She poured a glass of water but didn't drink it. She just stood there, one hand on the counter, the other clutching the glass, as her mind circled the memory again and again. Mr. Kane's grin. His hand. The slap. Her report. Dr. Brown's eyes. The other slap. And the words, "You're finished here." Her dignity, her career, swept aside like they meant nothing. And Mr. Kane? She imagined him now, probably reclining in his hospital bed, weaving lies about how she had attacked him without reason. The staff would nod politely. Some might even believe him. A helpless old man in a wheelchair. Who would dare question his version of events? Laura closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against the fridge. The steel was cold, grounding. She had stood up for herself, and for that, she was punished. That truth kept tightening around her chest like a vice. Had she stayed silent, she might still have her job. She could have looked the other way, told herself it wasn't that bad. But then what? How long before he did it again? To her? To someone else? Her eyes drifted across the kitchen to the corkboard on the wall. Pinned to it were faded photographs, a snapshot from nursing school graduation, her beaming in her white coat, a photo of her and her younger brother at a diner, laughing with their mouths wide open. A hospital birthday card signed by all the children in pediatrics. Her entire identity had been built around caregiving, around compassion, around doing the right thing. But today, the right thing had cost her everything. She walked slowly back into the living room, sat on the couch, and hugged a pillow close. The sound of the rain outside was like static in her brain, filling the spaces where peace used to live. She thought of Dr. Brown. His expression was burned into her memory, cold, authoritative, like her words had insulted him more than anything else. And that slap, not just the physical pain, which had dulled now, but the meaning behind it. A man of power reminding a woman of her place. Not just any man, her boss, the one entrusted with protecting his staff. He hadn't just silenced her. He'd chosen to believe a predator. Laura reached for her journal, one she hadn't touched in months. She flipped past pages filled with notes on patient care, dreams for her future, late-night reflections. Then, she started to write. Tonight, I lost my job. But more than that, I lost the illusion. The illusion that good people in charge will always do the right thing. I saw fear today. Not mine, Dr. Brown's. Fear of what the truth might cost his reputation. So he picked the lie. He picked silence. And he let me walk out that door carrying shame that didn't belong to me. She closed the journal. Her fingers trembled. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was hollow. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the ache, a slow warmth began to flicker. Not revenge, but resolve. They thought it was over. Mr. Kane would gloat. Dr. Brown would forget. The clinic would move on. But justice has its own clock. And it ticks even in silence. She didn't know it yet, but at that very moment, as the storm raged outside and water traced lines down her apartment window, tiny streams of truth were beginning to pool in the right places. Back at the clinic, the security office was going through routine footage review. It was standard procedure, required by internal safety compliance laws. No one paid much attention to the cameras tucked discreetly into ceilings and hallways, until one particular clip made someone freeze. But Laura didn't know that yet. All she knew was that she had no job, no plan, and no idea how to move forward. And still, she didn't regret defending herself. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Jenna. You didn't deserve that. And you weren't wrong. This time, Laura typed back. Thanks. One word. Small, but it meant she hadn't given up. The rain outside began to slow. Not stop, just slow. Like the beginning of a breath after holding it too long. 3 days had passed. 3 long, aching days since Nurse Laura had walked out of St. Joseph's Clinic with the sting of a slap on her face and the collapse of her career trailing behind her like a shadow. Outside, the world continued on with indifference. The city didn't pause for her pain. Horns honked. Elevators dinged. Children laughed on sidewalks and buses roared past, none of them knowing that one woman, sitting silently in her apartment above a bakery in Brooklyn, was unraveling quietly behind her front door. The air inside her apartment was still. She hadn't moved much since the incident. The walls, once covered in soft blue paint and covered with neatly framed memories, now felt sterile and foreign. She had stopped making coffee. Her mail had begun to pile by the door. Days and nights blurred into each other in muted silence, broken only by the occasional buzz of her phone, messages she mostly ignored. Until this morning. Her phone rang. Not buzzed. Not chimed with another ping of pity. It rang sharp, unexpected, real. She blinked, startled. Her fingers hesitated before she picked it up. Unknown number. Part of her didn't want to answer, but something in her gut told her to. Hello, she said, voice raspier than usual. Good morning. Is this Nurse Laura Mendez? The voice was crisp, polite. A woman. Professional. This is she. This is Allison Reese from the IT compliance team at St. Joseph's. I know this may be unexpected, but we'd like to request your presence at the clinic today. There's something we need to go over with you, regarding your termination. Laura sat up straighter. Her heart, dulled from 3 days of grief, stuttered in her chest. I'm not sure I understand, she said slowly. There's new information, the voice replied, carefully measured. We believe it would be best discussed in person. You are not in any trouble. We simply need to show you something. Would 2 p.m. work for you? Laura stared at the chipped edge of her coffee table. Her mind flooded with memories of humiliation, pain, of walking out with nothing. Part of her wanted to say no, to hang up and forget this place existed. But that same quiet flicker inside her, the one that kept her breathing these last few days, whispered, Go. I'll be there. Thank you. You'll be met at the front desk. The call ended. Laura sat still, the phone resting in her palm like a ticking bomb. What could they possibly want to show her now? Was this another blow? A way to legally protect themselves? A last attempt at control? She didn't know. But one thing had become clear the moment the call ended. They needed her back. At exactly 1:58 p.m. Laura stood in front of the clinic's glass doors. The very same doors she'd been escorted through just days ago, jobless and shamed. Her reflection stared back at her faintly in the glass. Tired eyes, neat coat, hair pulled into a low bun. The look of a woman who wasn't quite whole, but wasn't broken anymore either. The receptionist, a young woman named Haley, greeted her awkwardly. "Miss Mendez," she said, avoiding eye contact. "They're expecting you." She gestured toward the back elevator. "Someone will take you up." The silence in the hallway was different this time. People still whispered, but now it wasn't confusion in their eyes. It was guilt and curiosity. A man in a gray security badge met her near the elevator. "This way, ma'am." They didn't go to HR, not to the director's wing. Instead, they descended into a level of the clinic Laura had never been before, sub-level 1. Storage, compliance, security, a cold hallway, no windows. The walls buzzed faintly from the hum of servers. The man opened a heavy door and gestured for her to step inside. The room was smaller than she imagined. Sterile white walls, a long table, a screen on the wall, powered off. Already seated were 4 people. Dr. Brown, Mr. Kane, a woman in a black blazer, legal counsel, and a man in his late 30s with glasses and a lanyard, likely the head of IT. The air was heavy. Laura paused just inside the doorway. The tension gripped her throat. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Dr. Brown looked up at her. For the first time in her memory, his face didn't carry pride or authority. It carried discomfort, embarrassment, guilt. "Laura," he said quietly, standing. "Please, sit." She did, but not for him. She didn't offer a greeting. Her gaze locked instead on Mr. Kane, who sat like nothing had happened, like this was just another appointment. She clenched her fists beneath the table. The woman in the blazer cleared her throat. "Miss Mendez, thank you for coming in. I'm Dana Wells, Legal Compliance Officer for St. Joseph's. We've reviewed something that demands your attention." Laura said nothing. "This is Marcus from IT." Dana continued, nodding to the man beside her. "And he's going to show us a piece of footage that was pulled from our internal security system, specifically from the hallway outside Mr. Kane's room. As you may know, for safety and liability reasons, certain areas in the clinic have discreet surveillance. That day, 3 days ago, your interaction with Mr. Kane was captured." Marcus clicked a remote. The screen flickered to life. Laura's chest tightened. "This hasn't been altered in any way," Dana said firmly. "It's time-stamped and stored directly on our secure server." Laura gave a faint nod. "Please watch carefully," Marcus said, then hit play. The room dimmed as the video began. There she was, walking into the frame, confident, calm, unaware that she was walking into the moment that would unravel her life. They watched the scene unfold silently. Mr. Kane approaching. His smile. His request. Laura nodding, following him toward his room. Then his hand. Reaching. Grabbing. Lingering. Laura's body flinched violently on screen. Her hand flew back. The slap. Gasps were audible, even from the video's own recording mic. Her voice was muted, but her body said it all. She walked away fast. The footage ended. Nobody moved. Mr. Kane sat stiffly, his jaw clenched. He opened his mouth to speak, but Dana raised a hand. "Don't," she said sharply. Dr. Brown looked, devastated. His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He turned to Laura. His voice was barely audible. I didn't know. I didn't believe you." Laura didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her truth had just spoken for itself. On a screen, in a room full of the people who had chosen to doubt her, justice had not arrived with flashing lights or loud applause. It had walked in quietly, with pixels and silence. Dana cleared her throat. "We wanted you to see it here, with full transparency. For legal purposes. For accountability." Laura exhaled slowly, her body trembling, not with fear, but release. "I appreciate that," she said quietly. Her eyes swept across the room, stopping on Dr. Brown. "I came here 3 days ago as a nurse who had been violated. I left as a woman humiliated and discarded. That footage was always here. The truth was always here. You just didn't care to look for it." Dr. Brown flinched like her words had slapped him harder than he had slapped her. I failed you, he said. No, she replied. You failed yourself. And just like that, she stood. Marcus turned the screen off. Mr. Kane looked up at her, but the arrogance in his eyes was gone. All that remained now was fear, and it was his turn to carry it. Laura turned toward the door, her heart racing. There would be more to come, meetings, apologies, maybe even compensation. But that was for later. For now, one thing had been made crystal clear. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. The morning sun filtered through the slats of Laura's blinds, casting soft stripes of light across her living room wall. It was the first morning in days that didn't begin with dread. The air felt different, lighter, almost still, like the city itself was pausing to exhale. Laura sat curled on her sofa, a mug of now-cold tea between her hands. She hadn't slept much the night before. The image of Mr. Kane's face when the footage played had replayed in her mind like a quiet symphony of justice. But even more vivid was the look in Dr. Brown's eyes, the moment realization replaced pride, and guilt took its rightful place. It should have felt like victory. But Laura didn't feel victorious. She felt still. Not broken, not entirely healed, but still. And sometimes, stillness was enough to let something new begin. The email came at exactly 9:07 a.m. Her phone buzzed once. She picked it up with the casual expectation of more messages from former colleagues offering apologies or platitudes. But this notification was different. It didn't come with a name she recognized. Subject: Position opportunity at Haven Crest Medical Center from Haven Crest HR. Laura blinked, uncertain if it was spam. She clicked. Dear Ms. Laura Mendez, I hope this message finds you well. My name is Dr. Angela Barrett, Director of Nursing Operations at Haven Crest Medical Center. Over the past 24 hours, your story has quietly made its way through professional circles. We were deeply moved not only by what you endured, but by the grace and integrity with which you handled it. We believe people like you don't just deserve support, they lead it. With that in mind, we would like to formally extend an offer for you to join our institution as head nurse of our acute care division. The role includes flexible scheduling, full benefits, leadership support, and a starting salary of $124,000 per year. We believe in protecting our staff as fiercely as we protect our patients. We would be honored to have someone with your strength and compassion helping us lead that mission. Please find the official offer letter and onboarding details attached. We look forward to hearing from you. With deep respect, Dr. Angela Barrett, Director of Nursing Operations, Haven Crest Medical Center. Laura stared at the screen. She didn't move. Her heart was pounding. Slowly, carefully, she reread the email. Then a third time. She scrolled down to the PDF attachment and opened it. There it was in black and white, a job offer. Not just any job. A leadership role at one of the most respected hospitals in the city. A name she had heard during her clinical rotations in school. A place she had once dreamed of applying to but never did, because back then, she didn't believe she was ready. But here they were, calling her. Not because of a resume. Not because of a referral. Because of her story. Her truth. Her courage. The hands holding her phone began to tremble. Her lips parted slightly as the gravity of it hit her. It wasn't just an offer. It was redemption in the form of opportunity. It was proof that what she had endured, what she had fought for, not just in a moment of defiance, but in the silence that followed, meant something. She set the phone down and rose from the couch. She walked slowly toward the window and drew the curtains aside. The city pulsed below. Taxis zigzagged across intersections. People in suits clutched coffee cups and hurried past hot dog vendors and school buses. It was a regular Wednesday in New York. But not for her. Not anymore. She closed her eyes and remembered what it felt like to walk out of St. Joseph's, bruised in pride, cheeks stinging, reputation questioned. She remembered the hush of the staff who watched her go. The cruel quiet of a system more concerned with protecting its own image than its people. And now, just 3 days later, someone had looked at her and seen not a problem, not a liability, but a leader. Laura turned and looked at her certificate again. Still crooked on the wall. But this time, it didn't mock her. It reminded her, not of what she'd lost, but of everything she had refused to surrender. Her dignity, her voice, her values. She took a deep breath and walked back to the table. She opened the email once more, her hand hovering over the screen. The cursor blinked beside the word reply, and for a moment, the noise of the world faded. Then she began typing. Dear Dr. Barrett, thank you for reaching out to me with such sincerity and warmth. I am deeply honored by your offer and grateful for the opportunity to work with an institution that values integrity and compassion, not just in theory, but in action. Please consider this my official acceptance. I look forward to joining the Haven Crest team and contributing to a workplace that understands that caring for caregivers is as vital as caring for patients. With heartfelt appreciation, Laura Mendez, RN. She hit send. It was done. The moment the email left her outbox, a subtle, unfamiliar feeling settled in her chest. Hope. Not the desperate kind. Not the sort that clings in the dark. But the kind that grows quietly, like sunlight stretching across a windowsill in the early hours of daybreak. She looked around her apartment. Everything was the same. The tea was still cold. The paint still slightly peeling in the corner. The certificate still crooked. But something inside her had shifted. This was no longer a place she retreated to. This was a place she would rise from. She walked into her bedroom and opened her closet. Pulled out the box she hadn't touched in months, her best white coat, still neatly pressed, with her name embroidered above the heart. She placed it gently on the bed. A new chapter was no longer an idea. It was waiting for her. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the polished hallway of Haven Crest Medical Center. Everything gleamed. The walls were lined with modern art, the lights above diffused and warm, and the subtle scent of eucalyptus from the wellness wing lingered in the air. But what caught Laura's attention wasn't the aesthetics. It was the way she felt, present, whole, and finally home. She stepped forward, her shoes clicking gently against the linoleum floor. Her scrubs were freshly pressed, a pale navy that somehow made her feel taller. The badge clipped to her chest now read something new. Laura Mendez, RN head nurse, acute care division. The words were still sinking in. A few weeks ago, she had sat alone in a rain-soaked apartment, stripped of her dignity, fired in public disgrace. Today, she walked into a new hospital where her story hadn't been erased. It had been honored. As she moved past the welcome desk, a young receptionist stood up, smiling. Good morning, Nurse Mendez. We're so glad to have you here. Laura smiled back, genuine and warm. Glad to be here. The words felt small compared to what was stirring inside her. As she turned the corner toward the acute care unit, she passed a familiar sight, something every hospital had but few ever stopped to look at. A bulletin board. But this one was different. On it were printed sheets, neatly framed, detailing Haven Crest's new workplace harassment policy. Clear language. Simple steps. Anonymous reporting lines. Quarterly staff wellness sessions. There was a small note in the corner that read, modeled after the Mendez Reform Guidelines. Effective immediately. Laura froze for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't even known it was being implemented. But someone had listened. Someone had cared enough to immortalize what had once been her pain into something others could now lean on for protection. She swallowed hard, blinked back emotion, and continued walking. In the weeks since she had accepted the offer, Laura had poured herself into preparation. New policies to review. Teams to get to know. A new rhythm to learn. Haven Crest wasn't just a hospital. It was a culture of intention. The administration had emphasized from the start. We want our leaders to lead with empathy, not just efficiency. And that was something Laura understood deeply. She arrived at her unit just as morning rounds were beginning. A nurse named Keisha waved her over. Laura, sorry, Nurse Mendez. You're early. Laura grinned. Old habits. Besides, I like to start my day knowing how everyone's doing. Anyone call out? Just one, Paul, from night shift. But we're covering. Oh, and new interns are shadowing today. Perfect, Laura said. I'll introduce myself after handoff. As she turned to enter her office, she noticed two interns lingering by the corner, fidgeting with their clipboards. They looked barely out of school, nervous, eager, eyes wide with expectation. Laura approached. You two must be our shadows today, she said warmly. They nodded quickly. I'm Laura, she said, offering her hand. Some folks call me head nurse, but honestly, just Nurse Laura is fine. If you get lost, I'm your map. If you mess up, I'm your parachute. And if someone makes you feel unsafe, I'm your voice until you find yours. They looked stunned, then smiled, visibly relaxing. I think we're going to learn a lot from you, one of them murmured. Laura smiled. I hope so. Because that was the plan. Not just to supervise. Not just to enforce. But to rebuild trust where systems had once let it rot. Meanwhile, across town, the lights inside St. Joseph's Clinic flickered on an awkward silence. The place hadn't changed much on the outside. Same marbled floors. Same fern plants by the entryway. Same golden letters above the front desk. But within those walls, something had begun to shift. In the weeks following the security footage revelation, a quiet reckoning had taken place. Staff whispered less and spoke more. Anonymous tip lines had been implemented. Staff workshops on consent, emotional safety, and communication had been scheduled. And Dr. Brown? He moved differently now. Not slower, but quieter. Less sure of himself. The man who once walked the halls with unshakable confidence now nodded more, listened longer, and interrupted less. His office, once reserved for executive meetings and business talk, had been opened up for weekly staff listening sessions. It was a start, an awkward one, but a start nonetheless. On his desk sat a file labeled, Internal Accountability Initiative. Inside were policies that would have once seemed excessive to him. Too emotional. Too sensitive. Now they were gospel. He never said her name aloud. Not in meetings. Not to staff. But he had written it at the top of his personal notebook, on the inside cover. What would Laura have done? Because guilt, while never enough, can sometimes become a compass. And while St. Joseph's Clinic tried to find its new footing, Laura was already 2 steps ahead, building something better. Later that afternoon at Haven Crest, Laura sat in her office surrounded by folders. She was reviewing team rotations, noting which nurses hadn't taken PTO in too long. She made a mental note to pull 2 of them aside and gently suggest rest. Not reprimand, just rest. Because she had learned that burnout didn't just hurt the caregiver. It created space for silence. And silence was where injustice thrives. Her door creaked open. It was Keisha, holding a small box. Mail for you, she said. Laura looked confused. Mail? It's from someone at your old clinic. Laura hesitated, then took the box. It was light, taped neatly, no name on the label, just the address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a small card and a folded t-shirt. She pulled it out and laughed under her breath. The shirt was plain white, but across the chest in soft blue lettering were the words, Justice doesn't knock. It walks in. She unfolded the card. I know sorry doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know that change is happening. Quietly. Because of you. Anonymous, but Laura knew exactly who it was from. She didn't need a signature. She set the card on her desk, folded the shirt gently, and placed it in her drawer. Then she rose. There was one more patient she had to see before the day ended. She walked down the hallway slowly, pausing occasionally to greet staff and patients alike. The hospital had grown used to her presence, not as someone watching over them, but someone with them. When she reached room 204, she knocked softly and entered. Inside was a young woman recovering from emergency surgery. Frightened, withdrawn, and barely speaking since she arrived. Laura smiled gently as she entered. Good evening, my dear, she said softly, pulling up a chair. I'm Laura. I just wanted to check on you. The patient said nothing at first, but after a few moments, she turned and whispered, You're the nurse everyone's talking about, aren't you? Laura paused. I guess I am, she said with a smile. But don't believe everything you hear. I'm not a hero, just someone who stopped being afraid to speak. The girl looked at her, then nodded, just slightly. And in that quiet exchange, something powerful passed between them. Laura reached over and gently took her pulse. Steady, calm. As the scene faded to soft light, Laura's silhouette remained, strong, present, and at peace. Justice hadn't knocked. It had walked in, quietly and confidently, just like her. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about Nurse Laura's journey? What are your feelings about Dr. Brown's change of heart and Mr. King finally being held accountable? Let us know how you felt about the way it all ended in the comments. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? And tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories travel. Your voice matters. Your thoughts keep this community growing. Thanks for being part of the journey. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong.